second video. In the last one, the first one, I looked at David Foster Wallace a little bit quickly, and I made the statement that, in my opinion, he's the last major literary figure in the novel tradition, the Western literary tradition of fiction. The last one to genuinely have the full ambition of creating a great work, unironically comprehensive and great. And I also said that he wasn't exactly successful, and I shared the opinion that his not being successful was related to his suicide, in my opinion, among many other things, of course. So I thought for another video I would look at some more recent novels and try, objectively, and see if they fit that statement. See if they don't measure up to being that fully ambitious attempt to create a great work. I also said in my first video, which is true, that I haven't read very many 21st century novels because I had the overwhelming suspicion that they weren't worth it. So I'm going to challenge myself a little bit, and I did this. I looked at some lists of the greatest 21st century novels from different places, and I looked at a few. I downloaded the free samples, read about them, read summaries, read a good chunk of at least the first chapter, and formed some quick opinions, but not uneducated opinions. I'm doing as much as publishing company agents do when they're looking at a manuscript. They read a good chunk of usually the first chapter. They read a little bit about the author, and and a summary of the book, and they make a judgment. And that's kind of what I'm doing with some of these. So I've got a list of 7, and I'm gonna go through them. First, we got Roberto Bolano, who is a Chilean author. Old guy, he's a boomer. He's born in the 60s, I believe, or maybe even the 50s. And in the early 2000s, he put out his last book, which is also called by some his major work, and the title is 2666. I downloaded the free sample on Google Books of 2666 and read a good bit. The entire plot, entire focus of it is in the world of academia. He's got their fictional academic movements and writers and philosophers, this kind of thing. That's the whole plot. And that is not unique in this list. Let's see, that two to 3 of these books out of the 7 are completely about writers, artists, or academics. That is a very small sample of the world, and I'm turned off immediately when that's the entire focus of the structure and the story. It's weak, and that was 2666. I read the whole summary. a major approach that Bolano takes in all his books, and definitely this one. It's very intellectual, academic. It's very detached from real people in the real world. So I'm going to move on to number 2. Oh, I got the 2666 title and Bolano's name from, this was a Reddit thread about what 21st century novels will be remembered 50 years from now or something like that. And I got about half of these from there. This next one I also got from that Reddit thread. This is George Saunders, a American white guy, older writer. I think he's born in the 60s. And this, I think, is his first novel. I think he's written a lot of short stories in other formats. But this novel is called Lincoln in the Bardo. And this novel was supposedly inspired by the story of Abraham Lincoln going to visit the grave of his dead son and holding his dead son's body in his arms multiple times. So this is a historical fiction novel, as is the next one. Two of these 7 are historical fiction novels. Now, the historical fiction as a genre, almost every time, is going to be pretty detached from the present time. It's not focused on contemporary society. It's not directly. And in my opinion, that's a lack of ambition to address the current time that I'm talking about. David Foster Wallace in Infinite Jest did that. He was trying to confront contemporary problems, which is the most ambitious thing that a writer can do and should do if they want to be great, if they want to be the best, in my opinion. So, Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders, historical fiction novel. And once again, I downloaded the sample, read the first few pages, and I was struck by it beginning with a 48-year-old man marrying an 18-year-old. And in the first 2 pages, he's telling the 18-year-old they're not going to consummate this marriage. He doesn't feel right about it. And then by page 5, they're consummating it. It is gross. It's pedophilia right there. That's how he's going to begin this book. I'm not into it. Let's go to the next one. Colson, Whitehead, Underground Railroad. This one won the Pulitzer Prize a few years back. 8 or 10, maybe, something. Not any more than that. It's a book about the Underground Railroad. Historical fiction again. And I downloaded the free sample for Colson, Whitehead, Underground Railroad. And it was engaging and very well written. It sucks you in. It's pretty much as advertised, a telling of certain characters' experiences fleeing slavery. And it's what you'd expect, and it's well done. And that's about all I have to say about it. It's not addressing contemporary issues except in a very indirect way. It's giving you that experience of the Underground Railroad pretty viscerally and with characters that you can feel as real. And that's what it does. So it's a great book within what it's trying to do. It's just not trying to do as much as is possible to do in a novel, which is confront the world today. And I will move on to the next one. This is a French writer named Michel Hauellebecq. Michel Hauellebecq. It's funny spelling. The one that was recommended on the Reddit thread that I was on was called The Map and the Territory. This is another book like Bolano's that is very focused on writers, artists, and that whole world. He's a sardonic, satirical, kind of mercurial personality, Hauellebecq, from what I gather. And the opening scene in The Map and the Territory is two of the worst postmodern visual artists, Damien Hirst and Jeff Koons, hanging out, and then that transitions into this fictional artist that Hauellebecq is writing about in this book. And the whole book is in the world of art and philosophy, and not surprising from maybe in relation to stereotypes about French. I mean, it goes right back to Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, and all that. It's predictable and not very interesting for that reason to me. I don't know what else to say about that one. So I will move on to Jonathan Franzen, Crossroads. This guy, probably one of the biggest names in fiction in the 21st century, Jonathan Franzen. I have never read any of his. I've looked into his stuff before, and I decided not to bother with it. But I looked again, and Crossroads is his newest one. His breakout book was called The Contenders, and that was around in the early 2000s. And that book and this new Crossroads book are a very detailed look at both of them at Midwestern American families. All the characters are in one family, and he's looking through decades and generations at their minute daily interactions and developments as people. But the scope is very narrowed down to this Midwestern American family, which there's an interview I read with Franzen, and he early in his career was caught up in the ambition of writing the great novel, the very ambitious, kind of like an Infinite Jest type ambition. And his big realization was to scale all that ambition way back, to just look at one very small thing, observe it very closely, and have that be the structure of the whole book. So, and by his own admission, his whole approach to writing is scaling back that ambition. And in my opinion, it comes through. I mean, he's done what he set out to do. He's created a very microscopic study of this fictional American family with nothing particularly outstanding and special about them. And because of the characters he picks, a lot of the deepest problems and questions in our contemporary society aren't faced as directly as they could be, because these people he's writing about are not the deepest people you've ever come across. They're pretty stereotypical problems. Crossroad opens with a Midwestern Christian pastor kind of having feelings for some young parishioner. Not unlike the George Saunders book, which opens with basically pedophile marriage. I mean, it's cliched. And that's what I expect from the whole book. I expect, cliches that are dressed up very carefully and very skillfully to look as uncliched as possible, but you can't get past it. That's my take on Jonathan Franzen. Please disagree with me. Leave a comment. Tell me why I'm wrong. I've got two more here. The next one is by an Italian author. This was on top of a lot of the great 21st century novelists, not on Reddit, on maybe a Guardian list or something like that. This is Elena Ferrante, My Brilliant Friend. And apparently Elena Ferrante there's some question about who this author is. Some people questioning, is it a man writing it actually, although it's focused, this book especially, but I think all their work is focused on women's perspective mostly. So there was some question about, is this a man who's kind of co-writing it with his wife, or I don't know. I just saw this quickly, but it's interesting. This book is about an older woman whose best friend disappears, and it's just a deep dive into her friendship with this other woman and her feelings about the relationship and I guess the loss of it at the end. I read the first bit, and it begins, I think this is like the prologue, with the disappearance of this friend, and it's very fantastical. The friend disappears, leaves her kind of mooching son behind, who's talking to the woman who's left behind, and she disappears completely. There's no record of her, no body found, and all her belongings disappear too. So this is like magical. It's not magical realism, it's just magical fantasy kind of thing. I don't know. If you're trying to confront the real world and say something about the real world, a device that strong, where this disappearance is just completely fantastical, is I'm not digging that. I don't see how you get from there to anywhere really solid. It may be a wonderful look into the intricacies of human relationships and how they work and affections, but you've already detached yourself from reality to begin with. And so I'm gonna put a big X through that one. Disagree with me. Tell me I've got to read the whole thing. I've got one more. This is a book called Americanah with an H. The author of this book is a young Nigerian woman, whose name I will probably butcher, but it's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I believe. And the plot of this one is a Nigerian comes to America. A couple are in love as kids, and they come to America, and then I think the guy in the relationship goes to maybe London, and they have experiences in London and America dealing with first world problems, basically, political, racist issues in America and that kind of thing. And then they both eventually go back to Nigeria and meet again. So it's a book about about that experience of coming to America from a country like that, going through changes, and then facing your home culture again. And my criticism of this book is this author is young. She's obviously done this. She's from Nigeria. She's come to America. If you do that, you're from a privileged place in Nigeria. And if you've been to New Haven and New York and London and all these places, there's nothing wrong with writing if you're from that privileged background, but you have to kind of overcome it somehow. You have to transcend it to write something transcendent. And I'm not sure, based on what I'm looking at, that this could be that kind of book. It's about experiencing different parts of the world, but not really the experiences of most people in either of those parts of the world. And this is a problem with a lot of authors who have been lifted up for diversity reasons, in my opinion. It's not, we're trying to bring authors from different backgrounds into this one literary tradition. And they're transplanted. It's not their culture to be part of this literary tradition. It's not a knock on them in any way. It's just that they're not coming genuinely out of the tradition. They're being grafted on, and for self-serving reasons on the part of the literary community, to make themselves feel better about themselves. It's not so much about the work or the quality of the work. It's more about that. Does this book, Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, does it face the realities in Nigeria and in global politics and issues of inequality? Does it face those in the deepest way, or is it kind of kissing up to the first world for literary success in some ways? I'm gonna go with B. That's about the best I can do. It's very quick. I'm obviously have not read any of these in full. I'm making judgments, educated guess judgments. If I'm wrong, let me know. But these are the best of the best, supposedly. These are the top of the list of 21st century novels. And I'm going to keep looking, and if there's any that anybody wants to suggest, I will look at those. But the ambition and the ability to confront the contemporary world head on is missing from these, and I expect from most 21st century novels. And I'll end with that and revisit, and maybe I'll be proven wrong at some point. But thank you for watching. Cheers.